Each pestilence follows a design. Across countless realms and innumerable stars, I've tallied billions of fatalities, uncovering a truth that defies comprehension. The deity of rot seeks no disorder whatsoever. His ambition runs far deeper into depravity. And at last, I grasped the reason behind the cosmos's creeping sameness. The instant those designs started unfolding before me lingers in my memory. On Gradial 4, 7413, 816 souls devoured by the ambulatory abscess. On Cadia, prior to its collapse, 317 443 seized by the crimson tears. Endless figures, layer upon layer of demise, all meticulously noted by my pen as I traversed the nursery. This was my holy obligation, my weighty charge, my esteemed honor. I am Mr. Epidemius, the enumerator, lead harbinger of pestilence for Grandfather Nurgle, and since the dawn of ages, I've chronicled every passing inflicted by his affectionate touch. The nursery sprawls without bounds in every direction, a frenzy of afflicted vitality and lush corruption. Its terrain mocks human cartography, with districts merging and drifting like discharge from a pierced cyst. Distant vistas might abruptly draw near. Nearby expanses could demand weeks of journey to access. Recognizable features turn out deceptive upon closer inspection, emerging as twisted mockeries of their prior forms. Lagoons of seething muck foster flowers of unearthly splendor, petals crafted from solidified torment, stalks throbbing with pilfered lymph from a myriad of the slain. Groves of mushroom spires rise imposingly, their roofs dispersing particles that sketch forms in the atmosphere, elaborate geometric motifs murmuring enigmas to minds sharp enough to decipher. Branches laden with swollen pustules rock in gusts laden with contaminants. Barks cracking open to expose visages locked in blissed-out torment, their foundations drawing sustenance from the melted husks of those who once spurned Grandfather's offerings. Beetles. The scale of war machines tunnel through earth formed solely from withered tissue, carving passages that serve as the nursery's vascular systems, ferrying sustenance and affliction from zone to zone. Streams of gall surge both upward and downward at once, their flows harboring finned beings that were once the majestic star vessels of the Imperium's armadas, now diminished and altered, yet retaining echoes of their past splendor. The heavens overhead, if any such orientation truly applies here, mutate ceaselessly from vivid emeralds to jaundiced ochres to the mottled violet of festering wounds. At times, they drizzle liquids that scorch on impact. At others, they stay transparent enough to glimpse the warp's remote territories, warped and hazy like sights through the clouded lenses of a plagued gaze. This realm is my dwelling, my bliss, my forever. I patrol its trails with devotion, logging the magnificent feats of my lord. My ledger of vellum, fashioned from the cured hide of a deceased world overseer who barred Grandfather from his domain. How naive the human psyche, imagining one could evade the inevitable clasp that claims everything. My shape has grown venerable, swollen with intent and insight. My lone orb perceives beyond mere matter, tracing the webs of infection as they radiate through existence. The chime by my hip tolls at every major triumph. A planet succumbs. A lineage vanishes, a contagion refined. The tone delights Grandfather, and his delight fills me with rapture. Yet rapture has faded from me recently. In my ceaseless enumeration of endings and renewals, I've spotted an anomaly that ought not exist. A structure amid what should be triumphant, wild abundance, a balance in the tallies that contradicts our essence entirely. It started on the farm planet of Septimus Minoris. A basic blight gripped the sprawling meadows of amber grain. Unremarkable by our measure, just a proving site for one of Grandfather's lesser inventions. I documented its expansion as required. 14 days to full overrun. 17 million perished from famine in the ensuing month. Routine, foreseeable, gratifying labor. But then the epidemic struck Terebus, a spire city 16 sectors away. Wholly distinct affliction, distinct inhabitants, distinct world traits. Still, reviewing my logs, the progression mirrored exactly, not alike. Precisely so to the precise moment of outbreak in urban hubs. Mere chance, I reasoned, The grand nursery unfolds in enigmatic fashions, and occasionally the identical bloom appears anew. But my intrigue was stirred, and for a plague herald, once ignited, such interest proves hard to quench. I delved into my timeless parchments, the ledgers spanning eons, outbreaks over eras and voids, scourges on peoples fated to oblivion, contagions that toppled societies whose titles echo no more in the galaxy's shadowed voids. And there it repeated, time and again. The identical designs recurring through the expanse of being, challenging all logic, every branch of science, every arcane ritual. What truly unsettled me wasn't the sheer repetition alone, but the deeper meaning it carried. Grandfather Nurgle rules over rot, commands the forces of disease and blight, embodies demise and renewal. His territory thrives on perpetual flux, relentless loops, boundless diversity. Yet this evidence pointed to stasis, to immutability, to something fixed in place. The consequences froze even my decaying core. I recall vividly the moment I shared my worries with Kugath, the plague patriarch, foremost among Nurgle's mighty unclean legions. We convened in the putrid marshes at the garden's outermost fringes, where the divides between worlds weaken, and faint echoes from rival deities occasionally drift on the rancid breeze. By the garden's eternal measures, Kugath was profoundly old. Legends claim he started as a mere Nurgle'ing, the smallest spawn of Grandfather's brood, but he stumbled into one of the Lord's vats, gulping down an elixir meant for the Imperium's emperor. The concoction reshaped him, ballooning his body to colossal scale, granting cunning and drive well beyond his lowly start. The botched destiny of that elixir still tormented him. It propelled him to refine his chemical craft, devising plagues of such exquisite virulence that Grandfather might at last absolve his long-ago blunder. I discovered him bent over a stagnant puddle of murky liquid, his enormous silhouette mirrored in its calm depths. Swarms of insects buzzed about him in dense clusters, tracing fleeting designs against the pallid emerald heavens, equations that faded just as understanding dawned. The toxic mixture from his newest trial simmered softly, emitting particles that decayed nearby flora and reshaped it, limbs twisting into appendages, foliage morphing into flimsy layers of oozing flesh. Quote, Kugath had chuckled at my report, his vast frame shaking with amusement, stirring waves in the foul pools around us. Quote bound 1. Yet uncertainty flickered in his numerous teary gazes. As a supreme chemist, he spotted motifs when exposed, much like any expert in their field. He'd glimpsed echoes of this in his personal trials, though he hesitated to voice them aloud. The holy figure of 7, I urged, displaying my ledgers. 7 infection cycles, 7 rot phases, 7 tears of agony prior to the end, 7 rebirth shapes from the wreckage. Invariably 7, eternally consistent, through all plagues we've ever forged. 7 defines us, Kugath responded, though his tone wavered. It's ever been our mark. No, I countered firmly. 7 marks us because Grandfather decreed it. But why? Why limit plague's endless potentials to these unyielding frameworks? Why force structure onto pure, magnificent disorder? Kugath offered no retort. Instead, he pivoted slowly, shambling toward the garden's core, his typical cheer dimmed. I sensed I'd sown unease in his thoughts, but in this domain, doubts sprout into horrors beyond reckoning. Soon after, fixation gripped me. I pored over each ledger, each archive, each enumeration I'd compiled. The proof stood unassailable. All outbreaks, all contagions, all lone incidents adhered to identical core designs. Sure, there were deviations, surface tweaks that mimicked freshness, but at their essence, the framework of contagion remained uniform throughout existence. What did this signify? What intent drove Grandfather's peculiar consistency? I needed clarity, and only one path led there. I'd confront Grandfather in person. No one neared the plague deity unbidden. Even his closest attendants shunned interrupting his ceaseless tinkering inside the central mansion of decay. Desperation fueled me, though. My whole being revolved around decoding Nurgle's designs. If those designs were imposed limits, not organic growth, then what role did I serve? What roles did we all serve? I ventured deeper into the garden, beyond vats churning like minor planets, beyond the revel grounds where Nurgle'S harried the spirits of life's rejectors of grandfather's boons, beyond the nurseries testing fresh maladies on imprisoned fiends and humans. As I pressed inward, symmetries emerged everywhere, the even poise of torment and respite, the exact rhythm of breakdown and resurgence. How had this escaped me until now? It felt as though a shroud had fallen from my lone vision, unveiling the garden's stark reality. Grandfather's domain wasn't the wild arena of chaos it wasn't the crumbling ruin it appeared to be at first glance. Rather, it formed a meticulously balanced habitat where every component fulfilled an exact role. The grand estate towered ahead, an immense edifice of decaying timber and corroded iron that endlessly broke down and rebuilt itself in a loop dating back to the universe's origin. From inside came Grandfather's chuckle, a noise that stirred both dread and solace, the mirth of an entity who grasps the cosmic punchline at reality's core. I paused at the entrance. Intruders weren't welcome without summons. Doubting Grandfather's ways was forbidden. Either offense could invite obliteration or, far graver, his disapproval. Yet an insatiable curiosity raged inside me, fierce as the deadliest plague. I stepped through. The mansion's depths challenged any human understanding. Areas stretched and shrank without logic. Hallways opened into chambers that defied the building's physical limits. Ramps twisted both skyward and into the earth at once. Pull of the earth flipped with every portal I passed. In a single hall, I strode across the roof, gazing up at chairs and tables dangling absurdly from the surface below. Elsewhere, fluids rose against nature, gathering into reservoirs that adhered to the ceilings of vaulted ceilings like quicksilver. The atmosphere buzzed with infectious vitality. Every inhale delivered fresh impressions. At times, the metallic sweetness of newly spilled life essence saturated my chest. Moments later, the sharp sting of factory toxins assaulted me. Soon after, the fertile aroma of damp soil swarmed with grubs and molten flows. My lone gaze streamed endlessly, not from discomfort, but from the torrent of input it struggled to absorb. The profound layers of awareness demanded to interpret the chaos unfolding, and throughout, signs of Grandfather's labors abounded. Seething vials of plagues arrayed along barriers that inhaled and throbbed in sync with my pulse. Twisting creatures immersed in glowing solutions stretched limbs toward me as I moved by, their mutated forms evading any simple labeling. Had they started as people, elves, or greenskins? No way to know. Their shapes had evolved past crude racial bounds, emerging as entities more cosmic, more refined in their taint. Archives brimming with crumbling volumes extended without end, every volume chronicling the full health saga of realms long vanished. I spotted familiar titles etched on bindings, planets I'd witnessed succumb to Grandfather's hold. Some were total mysteries to me. Maybe from remote star systems or alternate dimensions akin to ours, or perhaps domains not yet touched by blight, their chronicles etched prior to their happening. Chronology holds scant weight in the immaterium, and even less in Grandfather's realm. At the heart of this madness stood Grandfather in person. Vast past measure, a peak of festering tissue and thriving affliction encircled by his cherished imps, who capered around his base like cherished companions. His shape celebrated the splendor of rot, every crease in his swollen mass a self-contained world teeming with myriad pests and ailments. A few were plain to see, wriggling larvae as thick as my limb, millipedes with body links bearing varied plague phases, moths dispersing fungal dust with each idle beat of their sails. The rest thrived unseen, whole bacterial empires clashing over his colossal frame, empires blooming and crumbling in mere heartbeats. His visage, what peeked through the churning swarm of grubs and sagging layers of dead tissue, bore a look of merry focus, while he agitated a vat vast enough to cradle a warship. One orb gleamed with a suppurating amber hue, oozing a viscous ooze that hissed on contact with the brew, sparking changes inside. The counterpart formed a galaxy of tinier gazes, scores of them in varied shades, each zeroed on distinct aspects of his toil. Several turned my way as I drew near, winking in rhythms that my thoughts rendered as signals of hospitality and mirth. His limbs, beyond numbering, operated on their own whims, each tackling a separate duty in his vast undertaking. A few churned mixtures, others carved into samples with surprising finesse, regardless of their bulk. More inscribed in hefty ledgers, logging outcomes, or maybe devising fresh formulas for coming epidemics. One idly toyed with a cluster of imps, tossing them aloft and snatching them back, the fiends shrieking in glee with every launch. And the most unnerving feature of all, his maw, a gulf wide enough to engulf a colossus, cracked his features in an unending grin of sincere delight and warmth. For that captures grandfather's essence, not spite or brutality, but devotion. A devotion so vast, so engulfing, that it inevitably unravels whatever it claims, reshaping it into a form renewed, one resilient enough to endure the weight of such intense regard. I drew near with deliberate caution, my bell hushed in deference. Yet grandfather required no chime to sense my arrival. He perceives every infinitesimal entity in his domain, each spore, each bacterium. I represent merely a grander aggregation of those same essences. Quote 8. He intoned without glancing back, his tone resembling the murmur of decaying flesh, at once abhorrent and profoundly comforting. Quote 9. His exact recall came as no revelation. Grandfather comprehends everything unfolding in his territory, yet it reinforced my growing intuition. Those figures weren't simple logs. They served as designs, schematics, recipes. Great-grandfather, I replied, lowering myself fully before him, my swollen body compressing against the writhing rug of the mansion's floor. Quote 11. Grandfather's chuckle reverberated through the halls, dislodging beads of assorted liquids from above. Some hissed on impact, others birthed fleeting minuscule creatures that scurried momentarily before perishing. Neglected? Oh, my loyal Epidemius, far from it. You've exceeded what I anticipated. Scant few of my offspring discern the motifs. Even fewer venture to probe them. You've accomplished both. You've merited the truth. At that, grandfather pivoted, locking his gaze upon me, eyes harboring cosmos of torment and liberation. His grin spanned a visage broader than an armored behemoth, brimming with sincere warmth. Approach, he beckoned, motioning toward the vast vat. Behold my supreme creation, the pinnacle of my labors since awareness first flickered in this frigid cosmos. I advanced toward the vat with care. In its depths churned a brew I had never encountered, a fusion not of one malady, but traces of every scourge ever devised, all held in flawless balance, none eroding or overpowering the rest. What do you observe, my tally-keeper of woes? Grandfather inquired. I peered into the vortex, my augmented sight unveiling the dances of innumerable agents inside. Abruptly, clarity dawned. Harmony, I murmured, the term tasting sacrilegious. I behold utter harmony. Grandfather's immense palm, rivaling a colossus in scale, settled softly on my form, a mark of endorsement, of satisfaction. Quote 18, he affirmed. Quote 19, quote 20. I ventured. Quote 21, quote 22. Grandfather noted, his timbre shifting to gravity, the mirth briefly eclipsed. Quote 23. He swept his arm wide, embracing not merely the estate or the grounds, but the expanse of existence itself. Quote 24. Quote 25. I ventured. Quote 26. Quote 27. I grappled with the revelation. Quote 28. Grandfather clarified. Quote 29. He plunged into the vat, his colossal grip unscorched by the deadly elixir, and withdrew a speck on his digit. That speck housed whole realms of microbes and virions, each in impeccable synergy. Quote 30. He pressed on. Quote 31. The concept overwhelmed me. Quote 32. Quote 33. Grandfather declared, his grin resurfacing. Quote 34. And what follows? Quote 35. What follows? To quote 36. What follows is your ongoing task, my loyal enumerator. You disseminate your modest scourge of enlightenment, you nurture opposition, you tally the strife and the anguish it breeds. Ultimately, you'll tally the ultimate triumph of constancy over disorder, of perpetuity over impermanence. He started to dissolve, his gigantic silhouette turning sheer, then invisible, until just his timbre lingered, resounding over the carnage. After all, what tale thrives without tension? What conquest endures without battle? Tally diligently my epidemius. Tally each demise, each metamorphosis, each stand against the tide. Tally the toll of perpetuity. Then he vanished, abandoning me amid the slain. My tally scroll gripped in quivering fingers. In that instant, I grasped the profound terror of Grandfather's vision, not merely the obliteration of variety, of depth, of awareness in itself, but the weaving of opposition into the fabric, the corruption of autonomy into yet another gear in the vast engine of merging. Resistance was futile, evasion impossible. Even the battle against leveling fed into the leveling itself. I resumed my role with fresh insight, enumerating the fallen, chronicling the expansion of Grandfather's afflictions, observing the faint divergences sparked by my own enlightening blight. I witnessed human societies discern the design as they devised defenses, as they waged ever more frantic wars against the gradual, relentless reshaping of all vitality into Grandfather's unified ideal. I enumerated their triumphs, fleeting and minor as they proved. I enumerated their routs, colossal and ruinous and conclusive. I enumerated the gradual reshaping of the stars, plague by plague, into a realm stripped of variety, of depth, of vitality. And I enumerated my own role in this stellar calamity. For I persisted in unleashing the enlightening blight whenever possible, persisted in cultivating opposition, persisted in generating the very con. The strife that my grandfather deemed essential to his scheme gripped me inescapably. I had no choice in the matter. It was woven into my essence, a fiend forged for one sole objective, carrying it out even as I grasped its profound pointlessness. Ages unfolded in the world of mortals, centuries, then eons, as the merging trend gained unstoppable momentum. Race by race fell victim to Grandfather's pestilences. Those who endured underwent quiet, yet deep alterations. The blending became stark enough for ordinary folk to notice, too blatant to brush off as mere chance. Humanity's imperium, forever suspicious and watchful for chaos's taint, spotted the peril only after it was far along. When their inquisitors finally gathered sufficient proof to lay before Terra's high lords, reversal was beyond reach. Billions had already been touched. Trillions were in the midst of mutation. Elsewhere in the stars, no group escaped unscathed. The Eldar, armed with superior life sciences and keen psyker gifts, sensed the design soon enough, yet their sparse ranks and scattered holds prevented any unified stand. Orcs, oddly enough, held out longest thanks to their crude forms and brute mindsets. Still, prolonged contact with Grandfather's custom-bred diseases started eroding even their resistance. The Tau, youthful and flexible, put up the strongest fight, deploying cutting-edge healing tools to detect and neutralize the sneaky mutations from the contagion. But their scarcity and confinement to a narrow galactic sector couldn't stem the flood. All the while, I tallied each case of illness, each fatality, every minute tweak in the physical and mental fibers of the galaxy's dwellers. My ledgers overflowed with incomprehensible lists of identities and figures, chronicling the grandest metamorphosis ever to reshape existence. I observed the dawn of the first genuine crossbreeds, entities defying labels like human, Eldar, orc, or any known kind. Organisms whose very cells blended traits from scores of ancestral lines, all meshing seamlessly. These marked the nascent phase of Grandfather's ultimate creation, the lone superbeing destined to enfold every spark of life across the stars. I logged their emergence as well, tracking how outliers swelled into thriving clusters, noted as they forged their rudimentary communities and customs, basic yet distinctly their own. The budding shape of the unified awareness all minds would one day share. Meanwhile, my enlightening blight kept proliferating, now borne by fervent sects who fancied themselves foes of Grandfather's vision, blind to how they advanced it. They dubbed themselves the illumined, the vigilant, the defiant. With fierce resolve, they battled the unifying wave, harnessing the fever's sharpened insight to craft fresh remedies, innovations, and tactics. They perished by the billions, their remains fueling the very evolution they aimed to thwart. I recorded every one, each entry etching into what served as my spirit. The galaxy erupted in turmoil, clashes dwarfing anything since the Horus heresy. All alliances, all races, all souls battled to cling to their distinct essence amid the swelling surge of uniformity. Carnage escalated to cataclysmic heights, with whole star systems obliterated in frantic bids to quarantine the plague. This was precisely Grandfather's blueprint. The clashes, the defiance, the pushback, all forged the end result tougher, more versatile, more whole. I saw Terra crumble, not under invading hordes or armadas, but to a scourge so insidious that its grip went unnoticed until over half its people had shifted. The God Emperor alone, propped in eternal half-life upon his auric seat, stayed unaltered amid the world. His decayed husk, warped by endless years of rot, left even Grandfather's deadliest pathogens with no fresh ground to claim. I noted the Exodus armadas, the escape vessels, the final frantic efforts to safeguard some remnant of unaltered humanity. Most came to ruin. A handful triumphed, seeding remote outposts at the galaxy's edges, delaying the end for a handful more cycles of separation before it overtook them as well. Amid the chaos, the hybrid entities kept expanding, maturing, progressing along Grandfather's meticulous blueprint. They built their dominion from the wreckage of countless fallen realms, birthing a realm the stars had never known, not of man or Xenos, but a fresh unity. Though drawn from vast biological heritages, they named themselves the Harmonious, the term shifting across their tongues. Their way of life defied easy judgment as paradise or nightmare, emerging instead as something odder, a fusion. A collective framework emerged where personal awareness endured, yet yielded to the collective's imperatives and aspirations. They didn't dominate through force. Instead, they integrated, reshaped, and evolved. I observed them in a mix of awe and dread. They embodied the destiny awaiting all galactic life, the template for every sentient entity's inevitable evolution. In numerous respects, they shone brilliantly. Their immunity to illness proved total, their flexibility unparalleled, their tech and mental powers amplified by the vast array of their genetic heritage. Yet, they suffered a loss. The distinct viewpoints, the vibrant cultural tapestry, the boundless inventive spark of a cosmos brimming with truly varied intelligences, all traded away for endurance and equilibrium. The untamed, turbulent splendor of variety gave way to the deliberate, regulated elegance of restrained differences. I tracked their triumphs alongside their failures. I chronicled their gradual sprawl throughout the stars. I noted the fading remnants of unaltered humans, Eldar orcs, watching their counts shrink from billions to millions, then thousands. And I persisted in disseminating my enlightening affliction, nurturing opposition, igniting the strife that Grandfather had deemed essential to his scheme. The urge remained embedded in my core, inescapable. But now I grasped its deeper intent, its role in the overarching scheme. My scourge wasn't a caution. It acted as a spur, not toward defiance, but toward the metamorphosis it seemed to oppose, the insight it bestowed. The grasp of the underlying motif merely heightened the clashes, fortifying the ultimate structure via resistance. I had unknowingly shaped the very destiny I'd sought to avert. That epiphany might have shattered me. Maybe it did. It's hard to tell wholeness from fracture when your whole being emerges as a meticulously crafted gear in a vast celestial mechanism. I pressed on with my tasks, tallying, documenting, propagating my blight. But a core shift stirred inside me. I started peering past the counts, beyond the figures, beyond the sweeping motif of amalgamation. I began spotting the subtle rebellions, the fleeting sparks of uniqueness that endured amid relentless blending. A fused being crafting tunes echoing their Eldar roots. A repurposed human clinging to old ceremonies from their past. A modified orc devising fresh outlets for their inherent ferocity amid the serene communal order. These weren't threats to Grandfather's vision. They were minuscule, negligible against the immense blueprint, yet authentic. They embodied the intricate layers the cosmos instinctively pursues, claims of selfhood against conformity, And amid these modest rebellions, these faint glimmers of singularity, I rediscovered something I'd believed gone for good. Not hope for triumph over grandfather's blueprint, that was unattainable, but for safeguarding purpose inside it, for upholding the essence of awareness of the traits that lend existence its worth. I started nurturing these instances where possible, quietly urging the amalgamations I met to hold on to ties to their ancestral ways, to safeguard shards of the variety being relinquished. It wasn't opposition to the blueprint, it was evolution inside it, carving room for significance in a reality drifting toward sameness. Grandfather, should he perceive my shifted method, offered no hint. Maybe it fit his blueprint too, another stratum of intricacy in the vast motif. Maybe he knew that genuine steadiness demanded not merely bodily blending, but mental embrace, that his cosmic entity would require echoes of its varied beginnings to thrive. Or maybe, and this idea was so taboo I scarcely let it linger, grandfather wasn't the supreme shaper of all. Maybe he too was just a component in a mechanism surpassing even his grasp. A natural power, enacting its part in the stellar saga, much as I did. Mine. The galaxy's reshaping endured. Ages turned to epochs. The unified collective stretched past the Milky Way's edges, dispatching settler vessels to adjacent realms, extending grandfather's outlook across the void. The final enclaves of pristine species vanished, their singular biomes fully merged into the immense whole. Their traditions lingered solely in the scattered recollections of their altered heirs. I logged it all. Each contagion, each assimilation, each vanishing. My ledgers swelled into a chronicle of creation's most profound shift. A manuscript no soul would peruse, yet one encapsulating the tale of how multiplicity yielded to oneness, how intricacy simplified, how turmoil, from the ashes of disorder, emerged structure. Yet even now, I disseminate my enlightening contagion no longer in defiance, but as a tribute to the past. A sickness that bestows not merely insight into the design, but reverence for the treasures forfeited, the offerings made in pursuit of forever, and commemorative affliction bearing the echoes of a cosmos once teeming with endless variety, now converged to a single essence. Could there be a greater aspiration? Not to avert sorrow, but to honor what vanished. Not to impede evolution, but to sustain the significance of prior eras. I am Magister Epidemius, the chronicler of tolls, foremost harbinger of pestilence for grandfather Nurgle, and I have tallied each demise inflicted by his affectionate touch from the dawn of ages. I have chronicled the most profound metamorphosis in the annals of existence. I have beheld the genesis of a fresh regime, a unified entity sprawling through all that is, immortal, immutable, perpetual. And through my tallies, my chronicles, my observations, I have safeguarded fragments of the preceding world, the throngs, the intricacy, the splendid turbulent assortment of a reality free from monolithic intent. Maybe that, in the end, defines my genuine role within grandfather's vast scheme, not solely to enumerate the shift, but to recall what underwent alteration, to propagate the essence that could fade into oblivion. For what value has timelessness devoid of recollection? What firmness lacks awareness of flux? What cohesion ignores the manifold components forming it? I persist in my tasks. I tally, I chronicle, I recall, and within that recollection, I uncover intent surpassing the instincts woven into my being. I discover significance amid a cosmos drifting into void. Does it suffice? I cannot say, nor comprehend. I am merely one demon enacting my modest role in a saga-defying grasp. Yet it defines me, sustains me, endures through me until the final sun fades, and even grandfather's everlasting realm at last decays and perishes. Tally diligently, he instructed. Tally each demise, each evolution, each gesture of opposition. Tally the price of forever. And so I have